So we're going to start off with Priscilla to my left. Just a softball question down the middle to get things rolling. I'm a seed stage startup, and my definition of that company is that the company has a little MVP, and they've got a beta client or two, or maybe a little revenue that defines seed. So how would you best advise a company like this on team building as the company begins the process of scaling?
That is a great question, Dave. Or, excuse me,
Harold, it's all good.
Harold. I
No
do
worries.
apologize. Okay, first of all, as you know, that when you start building a company, especially seed stage, it is critical to begin with the scaling process. So the first thing you're going to do is make sure you can identify your core team. Put together a strong team to start building your business. This includes everything from your marketing specialists to your operations, day-to-day logistics, and also your business managers. Second, you're going to hire potential, passion, culture fit employees. Then you're going to outsource. I always tell my clients, make sure you outsource the non-core positions like admin and HR. You don't need to hire on those types of teammates when you're scaling your business. Next, you're going to create clear job descriptions, and you're also going to make sure that everyone that you hire on your team is very skilled and they have direction in helping you move your business forward. Those are just some of the things I do talk to my clients about.
That's all good advice. Any of the other panelists want to kick in on that question?
What if you don't have the money to hire a large team?
That's a very good question. Thank you so much. So once again, outsource, which means there are a lot of companies that offer people, they will come in free and they will work on a temporary 6 months, anywhere from 6 to 9 month basis. And they will offer, you can train them, excuse me, I have 100 things going on in my head. You can train them for a specific position within your company.
Okay, that's great. Our next question is going to be for Stanley. Let's continue to explore that team building idea, as it's one of the most important and challenging aspects of getting from seed to scale. Stanley, can you talk about your experiences in team building, perhaps focus on outsourcing or insourcing talent?
Yeah, I'm going to ride on Simon's question. What if I don't have the money to address insourcing and outsourcing? And particularly, how do we provide the cohesiveness between the teams when you outsource and insource, especially when we're doing globalization? And jump to the conclusion now we address in the middle is about workforce development, which is what we're working with the different colleges, is to bridge that gap what Priscilla has talked about. How can we fill in those gaps when we don't have money, right? So go back into part of the cohesiveness is now we're working with AI. The most important part for my company when we're doing development, whether outsource or insource, is the security risk. And what is the momentum we create between the teams to maintain that cohesiveness? My recommendation to a lot of people is pace, style, capacity. So based on those three elements, how do we measure a team's success and put together the pace, the style of internal or outsourcing, and what are the capacity? Then we break it down into the task, we break it down to the projects, depends on the time and the budget, to evaluate each individual or in teams, how they perform with their KPI. Well, of course, the management comes in is looking into the governance process, the risk process. What are the most important factors that we need to look at to focusing on that cohesiveness and delivering the value, whether by internal or outsourcing team? As part of the process, going from the interns into the students, fresh graduate, and train them to be an entrepreneur in their mind, in their spirit. And that's part of the capacity. We know, as we all know, we hire people, they're gonna leave, especially in Silicon Valley. We know they're gonna leave in 3 to 5 years if you're lucky. But because if we build this culture in the capacity and the style, then they would be more adaptive and they'd be more cohesive.
That's a brilliant answer. And I got to say, it touches on corporate culture too, which is so important to a startup. I mean, I think it's something that a lot of startups live and die on. A lot of startups can deal with a lot of bumps in the road if the corporate culture is right. So next question is going to be for Dave. Dave, building on the previous comments, you were a founder and led a startup from seed to scale to exit to IPO. Are there challenges that you experienced that you wish someone would have prepared you for, like along the lines of what we're talking about today? Perhaps you outlined a few of these in your book.
You guys hear me okay? I literally just turned this thing on to make sure it's working.
Hold it closer.
Okay, great. I mean, so many challenges. The book I actually wrote for my younger self. So I think it's a good question. And some of the things that I saw, first of all, I didn't really understand that venture capital was a hits business, right? That, they make their money on 1 out of 10 companies doing extremely well. I didn't really know those odds. And I've actually looked it up and found out that entrepreneurs believe they have an 82% chance of success. So somewhere between the 10% likelihood of success and the 82% that entrepreneurs believe are some significant challenges. And that's what I wrote the book to help with. I think some of the myths that maybe I believed as a younger entrepreneur were that raising a lot of money leads to success, that scaling quickly leads to success, that a big market is the thing to focus on and that leads to success, and that intense drive and passion leads to success. So those are 4 of the myths that I sought to dispel in the book and to kind of try to illuminate the systemic challenges that confront entrepreneurs in the funding environment and just the overall ecosystem, and then the inner challenges. What are the psychological blind spots and insecurities, the fears that plague us all, myself included, that lead to decisions that can get companies stuck? And then how do we support that? How do we support founders and CEOs, and how do they support themselves to put themselves in the best athletic conditioning to be what that company really needs? And at the time, I didn't really understand that. And I think I wish I had been able to do that work to get past some of my blind spots, because I would have been more intuitive as a leader as opposed to trying to follow somebody else's playbook.
That's great. Simon, you were nodding at about 30 times per second, so I'm assuming you might want to get in on that. I'm going to let you a chance.
I mean, you made me want to read your book. A lot of really good nuggets. Definitely. I think one of the key points that you didn't explicitly state is a success for a VC is not necessarily the same as a success for a founder. There's plenty of great exits for founders that are not that 1 in 10 for the VC. Smaller exits, just exiting period and moving on to your next thing. There's a lot of learnings, a lot of things become much easier. So yeah,
Wow, that's such a great point. I think as a young man, when I first got into fundraising, you hear the word venture capital firm and you're thinking, wow, these guys are loaded, they're out on private jets. Man, it couldn't be further from the truth. These guys are eating ramen noodles and trying to get through their first fund, and they don't know how they're going to pay their electric bill. You wouldn't believe the majority of the first-time VCs that are not doing that well. You think that 2% of the AUM is a lot, but boy, it couldn't be further from the truth. And I think, honestly, a good advice that I would give to any startup is learn that business. Learn who you're talking to. When you're talking to an angel investor, understand what it is that they're looking for, that kind of thing. And to understand venture capital firms and what they're doing and what their goals are, so that you can speak to what their needs are. Simon, next question is going to be for you. We're going to shift our focus now to my battery dying on the microphone I'm holding. And so let's go to scaling now. Well, we've talked a little bit about the seed stage where you're starting to build, but let's talk about scaling now. You've gotten your MVP done. You've gotten some solid customers. You're starting to build some real revenue. Your firm, Simon, invests almost exclusively at the pre-seed stage. Since nothing we've discussed so far is possible without funding, what advice would you give startups building a fundraising campaign in the current environment? What aspects, whether it's the team, the product, or the current sales, what do you look for from founders when potentially deciding to invest?
Yeah, great question. So for those of you in the audience that I know the title is seed, but just to clarify, pre-seed is kind of a subset of seed, typically associated with maybe what used to be angel investing. It's becoming more institutionalized than earlier. Great comments about VCs. We are a fund one. We're also fundraising. I've been an entrepreneur. I've raised as a founder and now as a VC. So definitely, empathize with a lot of founders there. To answer the question, first of all, I disagree with one of the premises that nothing is possible without funding. Definitely, the more you can do before fundraising, the easier fundraising is. In fact, I get asked a lot, what are the best recommendations for fundraising? Part of this question. It's not treat the VCs as humans, try to understand what they are focused on, like what are they themselves trying to accomplish. There are a lot of, you've mentioned emerging VCs, there are a lot of niche emerging VCs. We're one of them. They all have a particular segment focus, a particular goal that they're trying to achieve. In our case, we're pre-seed, focused on deep tech, and within deep tech, we love industrials. That's kind of our background. That's where we add the most value. So that's where we tend to focus on. Industrials for us includes sustainable manufacturing, supply chain, engineering tools, and robotics. With regards to mentioning the word raising a fundraising campaign, I think I was having a conversation about this earlier. A lot of people don't realize that fundraising doesn't happen actually like you hear about in the news. Again, one in 100 startups get funding like you hear about in the news, or maybe less. The vast majority of our portfolio companies take months to close their first VC round. 6, 12 months. Like last year was a horrible environment. This year's a little better. So that's great. Great thing, and really, it is a campaign, right? You want to have multiple touch points. You want to show progress. You want to build trust and relationship build. Great book I would recommend. Besides yours, it sounds like great. I haven't read it yet, but Fundraising. That's it. It's just called Fundraising by Ryan Breslow. It's a 60-minute read. No one in this room has an excuse not to spend 60 minutes learning about how to just run a fundraising campaign. I literally don't teach this to any of our founders. I just say, read the book and then ask me some questions. Another thing, too many startups spend too much time on their deck. Like they'll just be in an echo chamber on their deck. The decks have this insane perceived value. The reality is hone your elevator pitch, or even better, your blurb. So if you don't know what a blurb is, go on my LinkedIn, Simon Lancaster articles, have Venture Capital 101, how to write a great blurb. Super important because it'll teach you how to very concisely present yourself and your startup.
Priscilla, did you want to add something to that?
Yes, I do. As a matter of fact, working with startups, one of the things I tell them when they're out there networking is to make sure that you ask the investor their thesis. Yeah. Do not waste their time or their energy by just producing or talking about your pitch. It's a waste of their time and it's a waste of your time. Also, make sure that you do not confront them with a 32-page pitch that's in your head. I've been in situations where I've seen startups do that, and it not only irritated me, but it also irritated the investor, who was kind enough to stand there and listen to it for 30 minutes. So try not to do that. Perfect your 2-minute elevator pitch. 2 minutes. I tell all of my startups, you have 2 minutes. You actually have 30 seconds to get their attention, and another 30 seconds to have them really interested. And that last, that's another 60 seconds. Sorry about that. My seconds are off. But anyway, you have a very short window to get their attention and hold their attention and make sure that your product, service, or technology is something that they're interested in. If it's not, once again, try not to waste their time. Make sure you have your information ready to go when you approach an investor.
I'll say, real quickly, I just want to say that my favorite quote about decks is that a deck is not meant to answer every question, which is what every startup seems to believe it is. It's meant to generate the right questions from the person reading it. So you want them, when they read the deck, you want them to be asking about your scaling plan, your financials, that kind of thing. You don't want to answer all those questions in your deck because then they've got nothing to ask you when it's over. What are they supposed to ask you? So the idea is to build a relationship with the person that you brought the deck to. Simon, you were going to add something.
Yeah.
It's working.
It's working. Okay. Priscilla said, ask the investor about their thesis. Like, ask the investor about their thesis. Ask the investor to tell them about themselves first. It is incredibly mind-boggling how few new founders do this. They just get on the call, they start spewing for 20 minutes, and then the call is over, and they haven't even been pitching the right angle for the VC.
Right. Excellent point. Excellent point. So I want to just run through the panel real quickly and ask you all on an individual basis if you could go back, and I know your book is designed to do this, so you're going to be able to answer this. I'm going to let you go first, Dave. But if you could go back and talk to your younger self about business and starting a company and getting involved, what do you think the best advice you could give for yourself? Because I mean, I know from personal experience, I don't listen very well because my son definitely doesn't. But bottom line is, what would you tell your younger self in regards to getting into business and doing startups?
I talked about this morning on a podcast, and I told it in the form of a story, which is that when we started Jive, it was alongside a company called Atlassian. Anybody know Atlassian? Right. How many people know Jive? Yeah, exactly. The reason they were a $40 billion company and we weren't is because I followed somebody else's playbook, right? I was insecure. I was young, and I thought, I got to do the thing I'm supposed to do. So let's do that. And we were exactly the same as Atlassian. It was two guys, they were two guys, we were three guys. We were the same for a long time. And then playbook happened, and we went this way, and that meant going up market. It meant going to enterprise. And if I had followed my intuition, it would have been very different. And I would have followed the path that we were already on. But it was a path that was very different than what I was being told I was supposed to do. And it's surprisingly powerful when you start making decisions from that deeper place of intuition, as opposed to insecurity, ego, and what the press, what your peers, what everybody else is telling you to do. Even VCs, no offense. But VCs are working on pattern recognition for the most part. They don't have a lot of time to spend with you. And so I would say, you know way more than you think you know. And you are way more capable of making these decisions. So find ways to get past the egoic challenges to a deeper place of intuition, because that's where you want to lead from. It's much easier to make decisions. It's much easier to pull people into your orbit, to hire people, to get customers excited, and to build something really unique that stands for something in the world, as opposed to another company running the same playbook.
Excellent answer. Excellent answer. Thank you so much. Simon.
Yeah, imposter syndrome is real. It's like a real thing. Almost every founder has it. Like, do not be ashamed. Talk with other founders. I have an article on this. I haven't written a book yet. Maybe I should. Also on LinkedIn on imposter syndrome. We've done a whole podcast episode on imposter syndrome with a founder that was really open about his experience. Yeah, like different people cope in different ways. Like find a community, read books, but you got to like beat it out of you, and totally like you got to get to your intuitive decision making, because your gut and your intuition is usually right.
Stanley, you got something?
Yeah, this is interesting because I'm the only one sitting here talking about startup, because I'm what we call ourselves the retro startup. I've been in business for 24 years, but now we have to take it into a different trajectory, because going from service into software. I'm not a software developer. I started with as a network engineer, but then going back into the point of what we talk about with all these great comments, how do I position my company now as a startup company with my DNA. And that was when I was reading the book, Positioning DNA. And then where do I learn that was from one of my advisors. Talk about reaching out to people. This is Cheryl Root from Carnegie Mellon University. She's well known. Told me you should read the book. The first thing she told me, read this book. It's called Positioning DNA from Andy Cunningham. Is to talk about the DNA and going back into what I believe and what we should do to go from hiring the first, so to speak, hiring the first staff or partners, bring it into scalability, insourcing, outsourcing. But again, going back into what I said earlier, my pace, my style, my capacity. How can I manage it? If I cannot manage all of it, how can I reach out to expert subject matter expertise to help me to manage it? And that is how we're getting back into the scalability.
Seems like when we were younger, none of us are really willing to reach out to other experts and ask them, like, why would we do that? Priscilla,
I still don't talk to my father because of that, right?
Priscilla?
Well, I have the opposite problem. I have no fear of taking a chance, and that has always caused me a little bit of problems because that means I don't listen very well. I just go for it. And if I make a mistake, I'm open to learning from my mistakes and moving forward. So if there's anything that I would change about how I started my company, it would be to listen more to what people have to say, even though I trust my own judgment so much to where I don't want anyone else's opinion to taint my own personal judgment. So I'm learning to balance things a little bit in that area still to this day. And I think if I had listened to people once again, I might have done a couple things different and not had to learn the hard way.
Thanks for being vulnerable there. It's nice. So if I can ask the audience, a show of hands, how many of you are entrepreneurs? Okay, and how many of you right now are startups? Okay, and how many of you startups are actively raising a fund right now? Yeah, okay, so you're in the right room. So my book that I've gone to so far, before I get Dave's, which I'm going to order on Amazon as soon as we get out of here, is Sunil Gupta's Backable, it's called. And it's basically the story of how he had such a hard time fundraising. And he listened to a lot of the stories that we've all heard about so-and-so that sat down with so-and-so at the such-and-such cafe on Sand Hill Road and walked out with a check for $1.1 million. And everybody thought that happened. And I'm sorry, but it's just like any movie. These things are never going to happen to you. So you need to plan for the hard road ahead of getting smaller checks. And if you do happen to meet that guy that gives you the 7-figure check, best to you, but that's not the norm. The norm is you bust your butt for a long time. So if we could talk, this is a Seed to Scale panel, and I'm gonna just quickly throw one more question to the panel, and then I'm going to turn it over to the audience. But if I could just throw one question to the panel, it would be in regards to scaling specifically. So this means you're making an effort to get to that point where you're achieving the highest number of users, or depending on the kind of company you're running. But ultimately, you're trying to get to that revenue point. And so I'm wondering where you guys feel like the number one places that you should focus on, or does it depend on the startup? I'll put it to the panel, whoever wants to answer.
Trust but verify.
Okay, that's good advice.
I would say wait for the pull and don't raise on the push.
Okay.
I mean, if you're pushing product to a market that's not ready for it, that's a sign things aren't going well. If you can't keep up with demand, you're getting pulled so fast and your employees are all stretched thin, that's a better time to think about funding.
The definition of product market fit, right? This is why you want to build and test and talk with customers early and get some initial proof of concept, some initial pilot customers, and a bit of a feedback loop so that the product you can say with confidence to the VCs as early as possible that you have product market fit and that you have customers coming to you and paying.
Again, good advice. Anything? Okay, so I'm going to put this to the audience now.